Welcome to 20 Minutes with 2020 Mendocino. On this week's episode, we are continuing our MythBusters Autoflowers edition, Facts, Fiction, Propaganda, and Truth. On this week, I am joined once again by my co-host and founder of 2020, Adam. How are you doing this week?
Hey, doing great, Carlos. Thank you.
So this week, we are continuing a part 2 of episode 15. This time, covering Autoflower, fact, fiction, myths, and propaganda from the breeding side of things. So let's roll right into it. Let's see. Can you please explain the process and procedures behind autoflower breeding? Now, I know that's a wide open question, but if you can summarize that for us.
Yeah, certainly. So it's been a big learning curve for us, and I'm sure everybody that's kind of joined the autoflower breeding world. But the essential kind of options when you start this is that you've got two choices. One is you can essentially turn your favorite strain into an autoflower strain, or strains. And two is you can make autos from other people's autos. So being the kind of DIY people that we are and that I am, I don't think there was even an option for us. It was, we're going to do this from scratch or we're not going to do it at all. And partly is I wanted to introduce new autos into the world and not just, take two other people's and cross them together and then, claim that we made something new. So we took the long road, the hard road, but it turned out to pay dividends for us. One of the things I learned really quickly is that the process is a continual selective breeding process. So the more generations you do, the more the better it gets. So as long as you're doing it properly, you're just improving it every generation. So it's really kind of fun to see how quickly that happens. So, but in a nutshell, what you do, if you want me to kind of quickly explain the process, you take a strain that carries the autoflower trait, and you cross it with basically any photoperiod strain. Now, the offspring of that, if the photoperiod strain did not have any autoflower trait in it in its past lineage, then the photoperiod trait is dominant, and therefore 100% of the offspring from that generation will be photoperiods. However, you can grow those and you can flower them with as photoperiods with 12 and 12, and you can cross them together. And according to the kind of basic biological principles of plant breeding, and you can look at the classic biology class, Bio 101, Punnett square, which probably everyone studied in high school, if not definitely college, is the simple kind of diagram that shows how the recessive and dominant traits interact. So on that second generation, you're not going to get any autos at all. On the third generation, you are going to get approximately 25% of the plants will be autoflower. Now, I say approximately because that number can vary quite a bit. And I can go into that a little bit later about how certain strains just tend to embrace that genetic, that trait better than other strains. And I don't understand why. It's just an observation that we've made. So beyond that, then you have to go yet another generation to get it to the 100% auto rate or near 100% auto rate. Now, I don't like that generation for release because they still tend to be just a little bit quirky, and sometimes there'll be autos that still want to be photos. They just maybe the buds aren't as solid. Sometimes they'll start autoing or they'll start flowering and then they'll start vegging, or the opposite, they'll veg longer and then flower like after kind of way too long than you want. So they just kind of carry like a little bit of more wild the way they carry the traits is a little more variable. So and then by the fourth time, you can really solidify it, and by then you've selectively bred this generation 4 times. So our general policy and rule with our breeding is we like to follow the 1%er rule where we start with at least 100 seeds. Now, that doesn't mean we have 100 females to choose from in the end, but if you start with 100, you can easily call out weak ones. You have plenty extras to get rid of things that don't make you extra happy from the beginning. So you're not struggling to get 10 plants to get through this process. You're happily ripping 10 out that don't appease you. So that's our general trade. I literally like to end up with at least 30 females in the end to pick from, though, but preferably like 50 or more.
So last week we briefly discussed how 2020 got into autoflowers and turned from naysayers into believers. Can you remind the listeners of what happened and why?
Well, yeah. So I was basically approached by a guy up in Alaska who needed medicinal autoflowers, and he was really upset with the poor quality of autos that he was getting from Europe, and the he was getting CBD seeds supposedly, and then they ended up either not being CBD or they were like pure CBD with no THC, and he said just general bad, like poor terpenes and poor quality. And he's like, how come no American autoflower breeders are really putting out a good CBD 1-to-1? And that's really what got us started. Was I started looking into it. I bought some seeds, some auto seeds to like test and to play with, and it's kind of the rest is history.
Okay, so kind of piggybacking on the question before that, how easy is it to maintain the traits from the original photo period you were trying to mimic? And just to give the viewers a heads up, or excuse me, listeners, we've definitely been working on Bad Girl, Glue Sniffer, Hair of the Dog, and a few other of our proprietary strains to move into auto form. So please be on the lookout for those.
Yes, and that's funny. I'm glad you brought those up because that's a good way for me to reference this question. So some strains it seems to be easier. I think sometimes you just get luckier when you're starting. The first few generations, it can steer off course, as I put it, and then it's a little harder to steer it back on a course. So then at some point you kind of have to make a decision after 3 generations. You're like, well, the hair of the dog is really, really good, but it's not really like hair of the dog anymore. Then it's at that point, what do you do? Do you keep breeding? Do you keep, just breeding it, and do you change the name, or obviously you always still want to breed for the best traits, so you don't want to downplay the quality. And this happened with our Durban, so that would be an example of one that definitely kind of steered off course. Not it was maybe meant to be in a way, because it turned out gorgeous, and we're really happy with it. We call it Durban Sunrise, but it's a purpley pinkish red, really pretty Durban, but it definitely lost a lot of the original orange Durban traits. It is pretty citrusy, but it doesn't have that pine citrus Jack Hare train wreck kind of Durban smell anymore. Some of the phenos do more, but it's more of a danky citrus. So, but it's a really pretty and nice plant. So it wasn't a failure. It just didn't work out as kind of our original plan to mimic that original. So, however, some of our other strains like the Glue Sniffer, I mean, it's almost on point. It's a little more dense than the original. It's actually rock hard dense. And it's really, really frosty and really gassy. So it smells almost exactly like the original Glue Sniffer. It's more dense. So the answer is it's a little luck, a little skill, and as long as you're improving it every time, it's really not a problem. I hesitate to call strains by a name if they aren't identical, and so I don't really want to ruffle feathers. We're making a biscotti auto that's really, really nice. It smells just like biscotti. I don't think I'm going to release them as biscotti autos, because I feel like someone out there is going to be like, that's not just like the original biscotti. And I don't, I see in Europe a lot of these European seed companies are just blowing out, every strain in the book. You can basically buy every strain out there. In fact, we're looking at some yesterday, and we made one with a locally bred watermelon Skittles. We made a few strains with it, and it's fabulous. It was made by Dying Breed Seeds, I believe, and then given to us by a friend who got them from the breeder. And just the other day, we were looking, and one of the European auto companies has a watermelon Skittles auto. So I'm like, oh, great. Like it has absolutely nothing to do with ours. But that's what these companies are doing. And, I'm sure they're selling a lot of seeds, but I don't know if it's fair to kind of be just claiming the same strain name and just throwing it onto every single one. So we'll see what we end up deciding with our strains. I think Glue Sniffer might be a fair one for us, but some of the others maybe we're going to be too far veered from the original to keep that claim name, but we'll still use it in the lineage.
Now I know we plan on discussing a little bit of a different system as far as categorizing the lineage on these. So I know we'll discuss that later, but let's continue with the next question. Is it best to breed autos with males or reverse females? And I know this is a controversial topic, and we slightly hit on it in some of our STS episodes, and as well as the two-part Herm series. We briefly touched on this, but can you go over that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a firm believer in breeding with reversed plants. There's a camp of breeders that are just like me, and there's a camp of breeders that are all about males. I can explain my reasonings, and I think I've got enough experience and observations I've made over the years breeding with both males and reverse females to conclusively determine that the decisions that I've made and the way I do it is the right way to do it. But I certainly wouldn't get into a fight or argument with someone else if they don't agree with me. But reversing females and breeding is a lot more complicated. It takes a lot more time. It takes two different cycles of plants. So breeding with males is a lot easier. um, However, if you're going to sell feminized seeds, at some point you need to convert those over to females. So is it worth it to do it in the beginning or in the end? That's a question. Well, for me, we do it either in the beginning or in the middle, but definitely not at the end. And the reason I like to just do it in the beginning and just start with females from the gate and never have to work with males at all, partly because we try to keep a really clean, pristine environment, and keep males out of our environment completely so we don't contaminate any of our seeds. And the last feminized seed run we did was a lot of plants, and we had 0 males in it. And in fact, we had really low herm rate, almost completely remarkably low, like basically 0, but maybe 1 or 2 that like had tiny little herm flowers, and we picked them off and they never came back. So we ended up marking the plants, and we're not going to sell the seeds from them, but it was remarkable. So, and this was with a lot of plants. So I can go back to this, but the reversed females, there's multiple things you can do. For one, with a male, you can't determine the traits that the male has. You can't determine that the male's that the offspring of the male is gonna have, and you can't really determine the smell. I mean, yeah, you can stem rub it or whatever, but with the reverse female, you actually get calyxes with resin and terpenes. You can actually determine the smell pretty well of what that plant carries. You can also determine the structure of it, the size, the general size of the flowers, the mold resistance, all these different factors that with the male, you're just rolling the dice. You're guessing. Oh, it flowered and it looks pretty. It's tall. It's got a good stem rub. Cool. I'm going to go with this one. Well, it's still, you're just shooting in the dark completely. And probably most of all, you don't know if that male carries the herm trait. And if it carries intersex traits, then you could pass that on to all your plants. So there's certainly, people that would argue with me, and there's anti-feminized guys out there for what reason I don't know. But I've again had a lot of experience, a lot of observations I've made over the years, and I have 0 reasons to have males in my facility at all.
So I know that we touched on this a little bit on the last episode, as far as fast flowering genetics. But are we always generally breeding for fast flowering plants? And please explain what are the advantages and disadvantages of faster flowering autos versus slower ones.
Yeah, so we did actually kind of touch base on this one a little bit, so I can go through it fairly quickly. But yeah, so well, I'm going to cover it a little more from the commercial growers' perspective. So one thing that we've noticed, besides what I mentioned in the previous episode about the really fast flowering plants, you don't have a lot of forgiveness with them, because if they're not super healthy from the gate, you can basically ruin them, or they can be like literally. I mean, I've seen plants that were like the size of a pencil, and with a nug the size of a nickel, the size of a marble or something on it, and that's just like, oh, it probably could have been a decent plant, but maybe one little thing happened, and it started flowering, wasn't healthy enough to shoot at all, and just ended up with these teeny little plants. So we really like to shoot for the 20 to 30 day onset of flowering. So that's obvious female flowers showing at a maximum of 30 days. And what you get with that is you get much larger plants, much bigger yields, and much more forgiveness. Um, and one thing that I'll be talking about later in this episode, though, is a future question is categorizing the plants too as well, and trying to offer as much data as we can to the community from our plants and data that we've collected, so we can share that with farmers. But in the end, yeah, we don't tout ourselves as having the 60-day autos, but I definitely say that we have some 80 days and some 90s and some hundreds. And the 100-day autos, they get big. So these aren't plants, these aren't like the kind that you see in people's tents that are like knee high. I mean, they're 6 foot tall plants. So, and it's only another 20 days. So, like, do the math on it. Is it worth it or not? I don't know. For some people, it's not. Depends if they're trying to burn a whole nother crop out of a year, because that could actually be the difference between 3 crops and 2. But a lot less plants, and a lot bigger plants. So,
So I think that
that's,
I think maybe that would be one of the disadvantages for the slower ones that we can mention on the home grower side. If you have limited ceiling height, you may not want to go for those 100-day autos that we're offering.
yes.
All right, so let's see. From what you have told us, you plan to eliminate listing, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. We briefly discussed autoflower lineage, and when creating some of our photo period strains and moving them into the auto realm, they may lose some of the traits that original strain was known for. So from what you have told us, you kind of are thinking of changing the traditional lineage of uh, female times male that is normally used in the industry, and we want to go with something a little different. I think we're calling it origins. Can you please expand on this?
Yeah, that's right. So this is a service to the community, for one thing, in that the traditional way of just saying, train wreck cross glue sniffer equals hot mess. It doesn't work with autoflowers, because first of all, unless you're releasing an F1 auto, which would be an auto on an auto, you um, you're most of the autoflowers, if you're especially if you're mimicking a strain, are F4s and F5s. And so what we're going to change the format and how we do it, and we're going to list them as origin. So we're basically going to put all the closest relatives, that we know, and most of the time we know the closest relatives. Now, we're not going to go back super far necessarily, but certainly in some cases it may only have one relative, like glue sniffer, where it's an F. We're going to be releasing F4s that are super homogeneous, and they're very close to glue sniffer, and that might, I want to go back for a sec, because I kind of forgot to touch base on this. But our original auto trait that we kind of got the trait from, came from you, actually, Carlos, in a trip to Puerto Rico, and it was sort of an accident. So Carlos brought back some seeds from a gentleman in Puerto Rico, um, whose his Instagram name is Remote Grower, He's a really nice guy, and he traded Carlos some seeds or something, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And it turns out the seeds he gave us were autoflowers. I believe they were maybe like generation 2 at the time, because they weren't uh, full autos. They were about 50% or maybe 25%. But we ended up
Yeah,
with
I
that
want to say
many.
what it was. He took a local cultivar that had been passed around the Caribbean. I think it came from, I want to say, St. Thomas to Puerto Rico, and that had been kept around outdoors in a rainforest jungle sort of environment for about a decade. Remugor received that from one of his older older guys that put him on in the game, and then he took those and crossed them with, I believe, I want to say it was White Widow from Greenhouse. And the interesting thing is that, like as you were about to mention, that several of them showed an auto trait, but I still wonder to this day if the White Widow he used was auto, or if the parent being uh, acclimated to Puerto Rico, which is on 12-12 all year, kind of brought in that trait. So I'm not sure if that's how it works, but I guess you can
Yeah,
expand on that.
it's somewhat of a mystery, and I'm not sure if he even knows. Again, we're both still in contact with him, and so I promised him at one point. I said, "Man, when we get God, at this point, these are like fifth generation now that we've ran that same strain. I've got some going right now, and they're gorgeous. I mean, we've improved it, quite a bit, because it was pretty wild. Uh, Lots of different phenos, but man, I mean, it packs a punch. It's super potent smell, super high terpenes, and it's really mold resistant. And I think that's accredited to coming from a jungle canopy. I mean, literally a guerrilla grower in the jungle. And so it's been fun to kind of work with something too that wasn't just a run-of-the-mill auto flower trait from Europe or whatnot. That we actually kind of started with a very unique um, and really nice autoflower. And at some point, I hope to release the actual double whites. That's what we call it, the double white. So that's what it was given to us as. So yeah, it's really pretty. It has the strong auto trait, and that's what we started with. So that I kind of should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I had to jump back to it. But um, again, now back to the question about the lineage. So yeah, we're going to use a format um, where we basically say origins, and it will have the last few relatives that we know of, and certainly we'll answer questions if people have more questions about it. But I think it's a disservice to the community for people to basically make up crap about what their auto trade strains are, unless they actually just made F1 autos and they crossed, an auto with another auto, and then I guess suppose you can use the X, this cross this type nomenclature, but uh, we won't be doing that.
Now, I want to briefly touch on something that will not be discussed in this episode, but another thing that you have been developing is something you're calling the PVI scale. Can you give us a brief sentence on that? And I know we'll have a full podcast episode dedicated to that very, very soon.
Yeah, this is a good time to bring that up, because I think the next question is going to be touching on that a little bit as well. But yeah, we have a whole, if not two, episodes about this subject. So me, along with my good friend and geophysicist modeler buddy, who's kind of out of work right now, we're modeling basically we're designing an online calculator, and that will be able to plug in a variable, well, not a variable, 7 variables at this point. It might be 8, of observations made from a minimum of 5 plants, um, and you will be able to determine an index, we call it, which is the phenotypic variation index, and that will be a number on a scale of 1 to 5. So pretty simple, not a huge scale, that will determine um, the variation or the homogeneity of a strain. And so 1 being Very, very, very homogeneous and impossible to reach, by the way. I don't think, you would have to cheat the system to actually reach a one. That's basically clones. Clones are a one. But it'll have a decimal format. So, you could possibly have a 1.5 or something, but that would be remarkable. So the way that the model works, it's actually, it's very complex. It got a lot more complex once I got the geophysicist on board, who's a professional math modeler already. And we really started breaking down the parameters individually and realizing that some of the parameters should have more weight than others. So for instance, like terpene profiles maybe should have a little more weight than plant structure or something like that. So we've kind of got it all broke down. So it's going to be really cool. We're going to be publishing it fairly soon. Hopefully the modeling's done in the next 30 days, and we'll have it on our website for people to use. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Right on. So I think that covers everything that we plan on changing or better yet evolving as far as strain description format in our program. And everybody please look out. I know we are going to be diligently working on a new catalog very soon that will include the autos, so expect that to be out by spring. And maybe we'll have a brief article on this PVI in that new catalog.
Yeah, we will, but I do want to kind of continue this a little bit more, not on the PVI, but our actual strain description, since we already started it. And we'll probably have an episode on this as well. Now this is a whole new program that we're designing to be able to give farmers, this is kind of geared towards farmers, but certainly home growers as well, if they really want to geek out on this. But we're going to be providing at this point a list of 10 parameters that will be classifying our autoflowers. So we probably won't be embracing this for our photo periods at this point. We'll be doing more of a traditional strain description, like a paragraph, like we do already, with basically notes from the breeder and the grower and paragraphs. Whereas this one's going to be more of like bullet point. But I can quickly talk about that and just go over what the different parameters are. I'm not going to talk about each one, but we're going to have the origins, as we mentioned. We'll have the filial generation, so F1, F2, F3, F4, etc. The PVI, which we talked about, the phenotypic variation index. And then we're going to have the first sign of flower in days. And that's going to be an average, probably with a graph or something that will provide. I don't know how much room we're going to have, so it depends a little bit on real estate. The total life cycle in days. We'll provide data for that as well. The height index, which will be a relativity index based on other 2020 strains. So we're not going to say this strain gets 60 inches tall. We're going to say that the strain is on a scale of 1 to 5 based on other strains in our garden. So it's on the taller end or shorter end, because you can't really tell people how tall they're going to get, because it varies so much based on so many different conditions. And we've absolutely proven that with side-by-side plants in different pots with different fertilizers. So, and even different phenotypes. Yield index, which will be kind of similar, a relativity index, because I'm not going to tell you that this plant yields 1 ounce per plant. I think that's just BS when people do that. They shouldn't do that. It's not right. It's improper information to go that far. Recommended plant spacing. So this is classic. When you buy a pack of tomatoes, it tells you how far to space the plants. So I would like to be able to offer that to people, and hopefully I can do that as accurately as possible and get as much testing in before we release too many of these to give people that information. And that's a really important number when you're growing an acre of plants, if you need to buy 10,000 seeds or 25,000 seeds. So plant spacing, I mentioned that. Aroma, so that'll be like the nose, and that'll be definitely a subjective category, just not laboratory, at this point, not data based on terpene profiles, but just more the aromas that you pick up when you smell it. And then we're going to have like a miscellaneous notes and bulletins at the end. So it's going to be a 10-point strain description is basically what it's going to be.
Right on. Last week we briefly mentioned our upcoming Autoflower release, which was kind of a surprise. We're releasing 3 strains at either week 3 or week 4 of January, either the 21st or the 28th. and that is Tricks, Triangle Kush Auto that we've worked, Vitamins, that's Mendo Cookies times Remedy, and that'll be a CBD dominant for all you patients out there, and Durban Sunrise, which is derived from our orange Durban. Those will be out this month. And then I just want to remind everybody once again that you can sign up for the auto race. If you're on the fence on trying our autos, you can get some free autos in February. Just sign up, link in our bio or at 2020mendocino.com/autoflowers. Also follow our new account, 2020 Autoflowers on Instagram. Do you have any advice for aspiring autoflower breeders? I know there's several of those out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think if anything I can say is, let's contribute to new wonderful autoflowers in the world, and blaze your own trail. Like, uh, I don't mean to sound mean, but I got approached by a guy locally that was like, "Hey, I'm an autoflower breeder too. I want to like trade some seeds with you." And I'm like, "Right on, man, definitely, let's do it. What do you got?" And he's like, "Oh, I got Mephisto strain A crossed with Mephisto strain B." And I'm like, wah wah wah. Like I don't I did I was polite about it, just didn't answer him or whatever. But that's not what I want. Like I thought he was doing the same thing we're doing, and really kind of blazing our own trail and making some really new stuff and putting some new stuff out in the world. So there's going to be people doing that, and it's fair game. It's not there's no ethical rule against doing that or whatever. But in order to really like improve the autoflowers and join the autoflower community, I think you'd be doing a much bigger service to take your favorite strain and be an artist and create something, create something new with it and phenohunt the generations. And there's a lot of satisfaction in it too, than compared to just making seeds. And that's the big difference. Are you a breeder or are you a seed maker? Because there's a big difference. So certainly I encourage everyone to blaze their own trail, and I'm happy to answer questions. That's why we do this podcast. If I'm available and I have the time, I certainly try to give people advice when possible. You can always shoot us a message for future podcasts on our contact us email, contact us request on our webpage, which is available in a few different areas on our website. And if you just put like podcast question or something in the notes, even if we're doing a different episode, I like to try to grab those from people and keep up with people's questions. And also, I know we're behind on this, but in the YouTube, um, we should probably go through those at some point, Carlos, and we can catch up on some questions that people have asked in there. I think that would maybe be a good episode in itself sometime, is just going through questions. So yeah, we appreciate everyone for joining, and don't forget about the Great American Auto Race. I don't think we talked about that in this episode, but go to our website.
If you want to go over it briefly, please do.
Yeah, so we talked about it in the first, episode 1 of this series. But yeah, we're offering our Free the Seeds event again this year. We're tentatively gonna start on February 14th on Valentine's Day, and there'll be drops at 4 different seed banks who have partnered with us to sponsor the event. These guys are being really gracious to do this, so hopefully you can buy some seeds from them in the meantime. But essentially, you're going to go on the website and order seeds for free, and some of them have offered to do free shipping for maybe a limited amount, and others are at least their obligation to be a sponsor is to do the seeds for only the cost of shipping. So you can't order more than 1 pack, of course, and 1 per household. There's a few basic rules, but for the most part, you just go on there and order a pack of seeds and pay $3-4 for shipping, and you'll get a cool poster that we commissioned, a really cool poster based on a vintage auto car race. You can see it on our website, and then you get 1 pack of 4 seeds, 2 different strains. And then the whole point is there's no competition between you and anybody else. It's just the race is kind of to race the 2 strains against each other. So you can grab, hopefully we'll have a little photo contest. Maybe we'll throw some swag in or something like that, but there's no competition. We just want it to be positive energy, good people. Literally the rules are don't sign up twice, please. Leave room for everybody. There should be enough for everybody if people do that. and no, don't be mean, be nice, don't be a troll. So we don't want haters. We just want people. We just want to bring the community together and prove that the cannabis community is kind of above what it appears to be sometimes. So let's have some fun and grow some autos. I
Right
will
on.
I will give a little sneak peek onto what one of the releases absolutely for sure will be what we call Trizzlers, and that's the triangle crossed with watermelon Skittles, and it's really really terp bomb. It's insane. So for the concentrate guys and the terpene lovers, it's going to be really it's a lovely strain. So that's the first little sneak peek on that. Carlos just got the first really good picture of that today. So
Yeah, guys. So as always, follow us every Sunday on YouTube, 4:20 p.m. We'll be back next week with some other cool stuff. And once again, follow us at 2020 Mendocino, 2020 Oklahoma, and 2020 Autoflowers on Instagram. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Hit the notification bell to get updates on any of our new video drops. And as always, man, you guys have a good week. Adam, any final words?
no, thanks for joining, and we'll try to keep these. I know we fell off for a little while with the holidays and just pre-holidays and madness and all that, but hopefully we'll keep this kind of weekly schedule going for everybody. And please send us questions because that'll keep us motivated and give us ideas. So if you have a whole episode topic or whatever, shoot us an idea.
Right on, guys. See you next week.